o'clock. Welcome to Coffee with a Purpose, everyone, and welcome to Ganesh Ramachandran. I hope I haven't butchered your last name too badly.
It's all good.
To talk to us about Natick Affordable Housing Trust. This also, in a way, kicks off our fall town meeting sessions because one of the articles, warrant articles 20, I believe, has to do with accessory dwelling units, which would be within the subject area of affordable housing as well. Ganesh, we usually start with having people do very brief introductions of themselves. We're a little bit light on attendees so far this morning, although often people do trickle in quite a bit over the first 5 minutes or so. But let's start that with folks at MetroWorks. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Okay. I'd like to start with Kathleen.
Good morning, Ganesh. I'm Kathleen Donovan, 34-year resident of Natick. I'm on the library's board of trustees, and I also volunteer with Keep Natick Beautiful.
Hey Ganesh, I'm Judy Dixon. I'm the housing equity advocate at Family Promise Metro West, and I've been stalking you at your meetings. So it's nice to see you again on a screen. I was like, I'm going to see him live and in person.
Likewise.
Good morning, Ganesh. You know me from the CPA effort. Cindy Bates, 5-year resident of Natick.
Hi, Ganesh. Bill Ramage, active with Keep Natick Beautiful and a trail steward, but of interest to you, I am the chair of the CPA or CPC committee.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
And I'm Martin Kessel. I was a CPA advocacy partner with the Open Space Advisory Committee.
Thanks. Is that everybody there?
That's it.
Yeah, great. Elaine? Nope.
Got two connections, but I'm not sure which one was.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's echoing quite a bit. Elaine Ostroff.
Long-time advocate for the rights of people with disabilities. Mother, grandmother.
Thanks, Elaine. Sorry about that. Great. Tom?
I know.
Tom just got to come off mute.
I think he's trying.
Yeah.
Have the speaker on, and the first one had the microphone.
There we go. All right.
Good. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from Daly. I'm a 34-year resident of Natick, also a member of Spark Kindness, and welcome. And I am a big fan of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Carol.
Yes, good morning and welcome. I'm Carol Berkowitz. I live on Lake Cochituate and concerned about the lake, and I was a town meeting member for many, many years, and just all things Natick.
Thanks, Carol. Brian?
Good morning. I also live at the lake, trying to advocate for the park, doing lots of cleanup work for Pat, real interested in the housing developments. We do a lot of work at West Hill and Cedar Hill. So we got some firsthand information I'd like to share when we get a chance.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks, Brian. Catherine.
Town meeting member, select board, and Natick Affordable Housing Trust.
Great. Thanks. Brinley.
Good morning, town meeting member, longtime advocate of housing and CPC and recycling, and really glad to have you here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Brinley. Sarah.
Hi, come into the screen.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hanna. Also a town meeting member and also serving on the CPA or CPC committee. Again, a long time interest in CPA, so and very interested in what we might be able to do with affordable housing. So looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. And I'm Doug. I moderate this group and kind of in awe of all of the volunteer activities that everybody else does that I'd seem not to do, but that's okay.
But he does other volunteer stuff. So it's all good.
Again, welcome, Ganesh. So happy to have you here with us this morning. So.
All right. Thank you all. I really appreciate the invitation, and for a presentation and the conversation. Name is Ganesh Ramachandran. I have been a Natick resident for the last 10 years. My background is in architecture, urban planning, and urban design. I was a consultant for most part of my career in planning and design, worked quite a bit on affordable housing projects and redevelopment projects, so on and so forth. For the last 7 years, I've been with the state. I work with the agency called DCAM. That's the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. We are like the landlords of the state, if you will. We are, responsible for the stewardship of state-owned properties, everything that includes community colleges, hospitals, trial courts, you name it. It's about like 60,000 square feet, and it's kind of exciting to be in the position I'm in right now because the state is in the forefront of advocating for greater affordable housing with the establishment for the new Secretariat for Housing and Livable Communities, and there's greater cooperation on that. Let me share my slide. Okay, you got all see this okay?
Yep.
All right.
It's a really nice church there on that screen. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We're everywhere.
Most of you, I might be even preaching to the choir here, but every time I see the next sequence of slides, it never ceases to surprise me, and not in the right way. This was a finding from the study by the Boston Feds. It was in 2017, pre-COVID, where they looked at the wealth based on race, and the median wealth of white households in Greater Boston. It's a little shy of $250,000. It may not be too surprising if someone owns a home. It's probably more than that, but you see whereabouts. But the shocker is when they looked at the median wealth of the non-immigrant Black households, it's $8. It is so shocking, and it is so absurd that the Boston Globe had to do a opinion piece saying that it's not a typo, that the median wealth is indeed $8. I mean, give or take $1,000 here or there, even if they are off by 1,000 percentage points, it's still crazy enough variance between the two. And while the study doesn't really tell you why this wealth gap is, it's not kind of that hard to connect the dots and talk about housing wealth and the wealth that's so. This is a map of middle to upper class African American enclaves and how Boston compares to other cities. I mean, you could see the huge contrast between Atlanta and Washington D.C. and Boston. And even for New York, it's probably a significant portion of that is public housing. But the middle class wealth, because of the history of redlining and our zoning policies and all, this is the legacy we inherit. And you can draw a straight line between these public policies and the state in which our neighborhoods are segregated today. So the greater, the MAPC, it kind of divvies up the greater Boston into developing suburbs, maturing suburbs, the metro core, and we are somewhere within this, the green area here is Natick. This is just to give you a sense of the geography. And it's been established that greater Boston's population is driven by immigrants of color. You could see there's a significant, and that's also true for Natick. There's a significant increase in the foreign-born immigrants, and there has also been a reduction in the number of whites in Boston. And the Metro Mayors Coalition, they established a series of housing goals for us to make way for a more equitable community. So the goals are in the orange salmon color. And how much we have actually achieved is like the red color. So as you could see, like we are significantly falling short of like the housing goals, the number of housing units. It doesn't, I mean, this chart would appear even more drastic if you were to like do this by suburbs. A bulk of the housing production in greater Boston is probably being picked up by like Boston and Cambridge and Somerville and all that. I do remember seeing a graph which talks about the housing production. Like, there are these like huge production numbers in Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, and once you hit like Newton and the outer suburbs, it drastically comes down. So even that is not a very sustainable strategy. We cannot expect the Somervilles and Cambridges to like pick up all the housing production slack that we are not producing here. And it has like real life ramifications. The shortage of supply increases rents, it makes it less affordable. And those things are, they go across race or color or even socioeconomic lines. So this is a question I get a lot. It's like, what qualifies as affordable housing? There are more than one ways to define this. So the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, it defines like, if it defines an affordable housing where one can rent or pay the mortgage that is not greater than 30% or less of the income. If you go by that definition, probably like 50% of the house, of those who are renters and owners are living in unaffordable housing. And this definition is really important when you're actually building what is called the deeded affordable housing, because the rent is kind of pegged to the household size. So the affordable housing could actually up to 120% of the median income limit usually qualifies for affordable housing. For example, the 5 Auburn Street development that is currently being permitted, that is 100% affordable housing. And I think the 100% of the units are going to cater to families and individuals making less than, I think, 80% of the median or even less. Some are even like 30% of the median. So it's definitely a much needed development for Natick. Let me just pause here for a minute. I just wanted to take any questions. Yeah.
Can you link the 30% and the 80%? I mean, are you saying that if it's designed for someone that makes 80% of the median income, say they had a household size of 4, and I see that on the table below that's 122,900 for our county. So they would design the house such that the cost of that house would be 30% of the 80%?
That's correct. That's correct. So let's say, let's keep it to 100 for now. Yeah. Let's say someone qualifies for a 2-bedroom unit there. They have 2 kids. They are making $150,000. So their annual rent should be less than $50,000. So that is maybe like, $4,000 a month or something like that. So, but a significant number of those who would be living in these deeded affordable housing development are not going to be making 100% of median. They are probably going to be making like, 50, 60% of median, and their rent would be capped at like that amount, and the rest would be covered by subsidies.
And does that number apply purely to the rent, so that things like insurance and the utilities would just get added to that?
I think so. The utilities usually gets added to that. Yeah.
Others have questions before Ganesh goes on? No, thank you.
Okay. So, and then comes a basic question. So how do you make housing more affordable? I mean, it's a very simple question, which not a lot of easy answers. The first is the government could directly give money or discounted income to low-income families, public housing being one of that. And we all know, that's not going to be possible that easily in the current fiscal climate. The second is the policymakers could increase the number of dwellings in a given metropolitan area or a town or a state by relaxing the zoning restrictions. So you are essentially increasing the supply, which could bring the rents down, which could provide people greater choices. So that's the supply side economics of it. And the third is to reduce the cost of housing, whether by means of reducing the size of housing, by using materials that are less expensive, by using technology, and also by making the permitting process less onerous. So the developers and owners are not spending a lot of money in permitting. And that's probably one of the hardest because the cost is the cost. It's what it is. It's expected inflation. And we all know, costs have gone up and there's only so much you can do. In terms of technology, I'll talk about it a little bit more when I'm talking about ADUs. There are prefabricated technologies that are still coming in the market, but building codes don't completely recognize them. Some states don't recognize them. So it will be, as long as I've been in the field of urban design and planning, I've heard about prefabricated housing for the last 30, 35 years. I still haven't seen that bring the cost down. There are other advantages. It can reduce the time of construction. You can, these off-site manufacturing, you have a high quality building for the same cost, but it does not really bring down the cost that much. To build a 2-bedroom affordable housing unit, these days, once you add the total project cost, it costs about $550,000 to $600,000. Sometimes it costs more to build an affordable housing apartment than a market rate apartment because of all the paperwork and regulations and all the laws. I see 2 hands, Pat and Doug.
Yeah, I think I forgot to raise a hand when Sarah asked, then told me she had a question.
Yeah,
Sarah and then Pat.
Yeah, this falls under your umbrella of regulations. Do they still have a program of giving tax credits for people who lend money for these developments?
Actually, I would say 100% of what is an affordable housing development, they're all funded only because of tax credits. Without tax credits, we would not be seeing any of them.
Okay, when I was still working, I did environmental reviews for people who lent money for those, and I did thousands of them over the years. So
the 5 Auburn Street projects is getting both historic preservation tax credits as well as the LIHTC, the low income housing tax credits.
Okay,
Pat?
thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering about your proposal a few years ago. Maybe you'll get into it. To have the, I thought it was a very intriguing plan to build affordable veterans housing over at the Henry Wilson Kalbershek location. And it was close to mass transit and so forth. And then the other thing, in addition to the veteran housing issue, those 2 large parking areas, one is along 135, the VFW. There's a fair amount of land there. And there's a fair amount of land at the other one, the MVET's over by the Cochituate Rail Trail, a large parking area. And just curious if those properties, since they're already there, could be used for affordable, say, veteran housing or something.
Great thought. Hold that thought. We'll get back to it by the end of this.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we are all required to produce a housing production plan as part of the larger 40B requirements and stuff. So according to me, we updated our production plan in 2020, I think the last time. So it's just to give you some numbers. The Natick has about 36,000 residents. The population swells during the daytime to 54,600. This is kind of pre-COVID. I'm not really sure if it's true now. The numbers would have shifted a little bit. About 70% or 72% own their homes in Natick and 30% rent, which is a healthy balance. And 1/3 of Natick households meet the federal definition of housing cost burden. This is going back to my earlier slide. They pay more than 30% of their monthly income for housing. The median home price in May 2023 last summer was close to $860,000. And this is again looking at the big picture. As a metropolitan area, we have some of the highest rents in the nation. It doesn't matter which data sources you use, Redfin, Boston Feds, MAPC. I mean, it all points to the same direction. And again, this falls unequally on people of color. So the Natick Affordable Housing Trust was established way before my time, and we wrapped up a strategic plan about 2 years ago. Our goals are kind of threefold. I mean, the mission is to like create and preserve affordable housing for the benefit of low and moderate income households. We are not going by the definition, the HUD definition of affordable housing. It's more general, and we also had to stress the word preserve here. So it's not just the creation of household, but we also want to retain and preserve the housing stock that we have here in Natick that can benefit the low and moderate income households. So when we started setting goals for the strategic, we did our strategic plan for the first time 2 years ago. We thought it's really important to like quantify some of these goals and make it a little less fuzzy. So one of the goals we set forth is we will create, or we will facilitate the creation of at least 50 units of affordable housing between FY25 and FY28. That's a tall order, but ambitious goals do help. And that's part of the reason why we put in like all our firepower in terms of supporting and garnering the public support for the 5 Auburn Street. The town by itself hasn't really developed or paid for affordable housing like in the last 50 years. So so we were definitely grateful to the town administration and the select board for making this happen, because the developers could buy this for $1 and then had to do the immediate remediation, what they need to do. And if everything were to go as planned, we'll get about 50 units. We'll get about 32 units in 5 Auburn Street. That's like more than 75% of our goal here. And we also work with Natick Service Council and Family Promise. And the goal is to like also provide short-term housing assistance. And the third is to monitor and preserve Natick affordable housing stock. A significant portion of our affordable housing is deeded, and sometimes these deeds expire after 25, 30, 35 years. So we work with an organization called RHSO. It's a Regional Housing Services Office through the town, which help track and monitor our existing housing stock.
Ganesh, on that slide, where you say it was established per the state's municipal affording housing trust law, is there a super quick way you can just say what that law does? And like, did it mandate that communities each establish their own funds? And then my associated question is what's the principal source of funding?
For a long time, we did not have a principal source of funding. For a lot of towns, the CPA is the principal source of funding, which we hope will happen. I see a hand, I'll get to that. About, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, we were able to convince town meeting to help us with $80,000 a year. So that's still what we are getting. When I said like it costs $550,000 to $600,000 to build a 2-bedroom apartment, you can use your imagination to figure out what you could possibly get for $80,000. And we also get monies from the inclusionary housing ordinance that became a law. So if there are developers who are not providing affordable housing as a part of their development, they can pay an in lieu fee for that. That could, and we also were able to get some mitigation funds from MathWorks. This was before my time. That was a significant portion, and those mitigation funds kind of help fund the Bacon Street townhouses that the trust built. I mean, like, Jay Ball and Randy Johnson were very much instrumental in making that happen. I mean, we actually own the property. But right now, to go back to your question, it's $80,000, and by statute, the CPA has to appropriate 10% each for affordable housing, historic preservation, and open space. And when we did our initial math about 2.5 years ago, we thought that's going to be close to like 150,000, so on and so forth. But we could also apply for separate grants, project-based grants to CPA, as long as it's capital funds and not maintenance funds. Question?
Yeah, is affordable housing, I'm a little, I guess I need some clarification.
Sure.
How much of affordable housing is publicly owned or managed versus like somebody who just owns apartments and the rent is affordable? Is that affordable housing within, like, how does that? Just, yeah, that's. I don't know how to say it.
I don't have an answer to how much. I mean, like, that's a number. It's like, it's the Natick, Cedar Gardens is the public housing that is owned and maintained by the housing authority. They get funds from the HUD, they get funds from the state. So that's owned and managed. So the other kinds of public housing is something that is a deeded affordable housing. I mean, again, you can have like two categories, like ownership and rent. An owned affordable housing unit, if someone needs to sell it, it's usually deeded for perpetuity. So you have to sell it as an affordable housing unit. So one of the critiques against the owned affordable housing units is like, yes, you pay less in terms of your mortgage, but you don't get to build on the equity. I mean, the property values may rise, but there is a place for that. The second category is the income-based vouchers and Section 8 vouchers. And it's kind of decentralized. There's no like sense. So if a developer has like 40 units in an apartment building, and maybe like 3 of those units are affordable housing units, it has to go on a lottery, and those who apply for the lottery, they go on a line and they get awarded on each project by project basis, but it's usually by lottery, and there are like long lines for these lotteries. Does that answer your question?
Well, so I'm thinking about the private person who owns a house and rents out, let's say it's a 3-story house, rents out all 3 units and doesn't charge that much. Is that part of what you all, I mean, when you talk about the statistics, are you including housing that is affordable, that's not, quote, affordable, like?
No, that's not included, but
okay.
It's not in, I mean, it has to be registered and it has to be deeded, and there's a whole paper trail. So that's why the one that gets recorded, it gets recorded in the list called the SHI. That's the subsidized housing inventory. And the 40B is kind of pegged directly to SHI. I mean, the units that the Affordable Housing Trust owns, like we own these 2 townhomes in Bacon Street. Actually, ours is not, ironically, part of the SHI, but it is being rented through Family Promise, and actually the rents are even lower than what a Section 8, Judy can answer that, like, than Section 8 folks pay. So it is actually truly affordable, but it's not factored within the SHI. But it's so rare you'll see this. I mean, like, if it's a private landlord, it's very, very unlikely you're going to see too many of them renting less than market rate.
Okay, so when there's statistics about affordable housing, they're measuring these ones that qualify, where they might be missing out on properties that are actually affordable because the landlord doesn't charge whatever, for whatever reason.
In theory, yes, but in reality, unlikely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Tom?
I'm trying to understand. You said it was about $500,000 for Auburn, and you're only getting 80,000 from the town. Where does the 420,000 left come from?
Great question. For Auburn Street, the trust has pledged about $600,000. I mean, of the money which we don't quite have. We are hoping, so far we have committed about 200,000, and we are hoping by the time the construction starts, the CPA, we can start seeing some CPA monies, and the CPC would be granting. So that's the plan. But that's even 600,000 is a small portion of the total construction cost. I don't, for 32 units, it's probably like a $15 to $18 million building, and that's being funded by the tax credits, by the state, and by the bank loans that the developer is taking, which would be amortized over the life of the building.
But Ganesh, I realize I didn't ask you at the outset whether you wanted the the prerogative of kind of going through all your slides before you taking questions, or
all
are
right,
you okay with this method of just answering as we go along?
I'm okay with this. Maybe I'll take one more question and then I'll start going. Okay,
Sure.
Pat.
Yes, you might be getting to this, but I was curious too about the accessory dwelling things.
Yes.
I know that's a lot of zoning issues on that, but I know some towns are doing accessory, casitas and stuff like that.
Coming up. So, I think we already like talked about like how the trust is getting funded. We talked about this. We talked about like the 5 Auburn Street project. So, and now comes the question of how do you actually expand these housing choices? I mean, the term "a missing middle" has been very popular within the planning and the design community for the last 10 years. And this is a great diagram. So if you look at that, there are like at the bookends, you have these single families and duplexes. On the other side, you have these mid-rises, 3 to 4 to 5 story buildings on top of parking. But historically, if you look at a lot of American towns and cities, there had been a wide range of housing choices in terms of fourplexes, courtyard buildings, the townhomes, and we don't currently, our zoning doesn't easily allow for these kind of buildings to exist. There is a single family and there's a 2-family, and then there's the multifamily. So the zoning kind of lacks the nuance in terms of like what can happen. So there's a lot of towns and cities are actively exploring these missing middle housing. So it's what we call the gentle density. So it's not a choice between a single family home and a 60-unit apartment building, but you can have your 4-plex or a 6-plex. These things are a little bit challenging to finance and pencil out for the developers, but it's totally possible. And again, it comes to the numbers. Like if you were to build a single family detached home, it cost about like $1 million. But and the townhouses are not that cheap either. It's maybe $1,000 less. It's like or even it's pretty close to single family home. But however, if you're building a 6-unit building, you could like reduce the cost by about 40%. So that's where this missing middle typology comes in. Like building more buildings doesn't mean you have to like put all your chips on these like large apartment buildings, but there is a middle ground here. I mean, and that's a perfect example. What you see, the image on the right, there are about 6 to 8 units in there, but it just looks like a large home or a couple of townhomes put together. The Governor's Affordable Homes Act, like that makes ADUs as of right. So that's kind of the Warren article. I won't be going in detail about the Warren article, but I'll talk a little bit more about like what ADUs what ADUs are and what they are supposed to do. I mean, there are more than one way to visualize an ADU. They can be a detached ADU. So that's like a separate small building in the backyard or on top of a detached garage, or it can be an attached ADU. That's like a semi basement that's converted into a ADU with its own kitchen and bath. The rule is it needs to have its own entry and fire exits, or it can be one in the attic, or it can be a portion as part of a house. I'll come back to, I'm just going to go quickly and take other questions. So this is where we are, I was going with the missing middle. It's all about expanding the housing choices. It's kind of a trade-off between the number of units and the depth of affordability, and also to have like a positive incentive in order to make housing more inclusionary, and use that in a combination with other tools. And MBTA zoning is supposed to do part of that. I personally, I'm not, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference for Natick, because Natick already has pre-zoned multifamily dwellings. There's been a lot of hue and cry about multifamily MBTA communities. It could affect some communities other than Natick. I don't think it's radically, I mean, it's important, but I don't think this is going to be a game changer in terms of increasing the number of multifamily units. And I can tell you, how grateful we are for the residents of Natick and all the community leaders for making sure the CPA is passed. This would be a huge strength and huge source of funds. Not that the CPA money is going to support a new development, but that kind of seed money is important to leverage. So when you apply for all these state grants, it's important to say like you are getting monies from all these things. So the more support you can show, the greater the chance of winning the state funding. So the fact that we have CPA and developers could apply for it means there are greater opportunities for them to apply for the tax credits and other kind of state funding. This is kind of the preliminary math. Maybe during the discussion, you can tell me if we are close to our projections or not. In 2022, we projected a revenue of 1.4 million from CPA funding, and of which 10% would go by statute to housing, plus whatever monies that can accumulate. It could be a portion on a case-by-case basis. And there are plenty of success stories on using CPA to create affordable housing, whether it's senior housing, transforming vacant lots, or building veterans housing. There's a whole range of examples here. I want to wrap it up with like a set of myths and truths about affordable housing. The first one being affordable housing increases crime. If anything could be far from reality, it isn't. And there's no correlation between safe, high quality, affordable housing and crime. And the study shows crimes more often due to the community disinvestment in housing rather than the creation of affordable housing. And affordable housing, and this is when an individual's wealth is so much tied to their personal property, there is a fear that like building an affordable housing is going to bring down the property value. Maybe if you're building like an affordable housing with 2,000 units, it could, but like having a well-designed affordable housing development that is contextual, that blends with the local character, it can only increase, and that brings in like more people in the neighborhood, like that can only support the retail and add greater value to the property. And affordable housing, I mean, these days is not ugly. And like, and it's like you are spending $600,000 for a 2-bedroom home. So, and by law, like even if you're building a 10-unit development and one of the unit needs to be a deeded affordable housing, it needs to have the same finishes and it need to look the same as the other units. And the photos you see there are all like affordable housing developments. In some ways, those that are transformed from the historic buildings actually look a lot cooler than like something made by developers with like vinyl cladding. And the fourth myth is it'll bring large families, increasing the burden of school. But the fact is, this is directly contradicts the demographic reality we are living in. Like, families are having fewer kids, and there are lots of seniors and single folks over the age of 60 who are looking for affordable housing. And this is more true than ever. I mean, this is can be more far from true than ever, that the affordable housing residents will not fit in our community. And we all know someone who's looking for affordable housing. It's someone, it's our family who's looking to start a family and being in the same community they grew up in. Be a veteran. It could be a single mom with a disabled child. It could be someone who wants to retire and age in place. Maybe they would want to move to the accessory dwelling unit in the backyard where they don't want to use the stairs and still have coffee in the same coffee shop they've been having the last 10 years. Or it's a teacher or a healthcare worker. So it's everyone around us, and it's now more than ever, the need is so critical to make this happen. So what can you do to help? I mean, you are kind of already doing it by having this conversation. So very grateful. And it's really important to speak up when there is a project to support it, because you could be well assured there'll be a lot of opposing voices, but a lot of folks who even agree in principle and philosophy with affordable housing, it really helps. And I don't think we could have made the 5 Auburn Street happen. We got about 100 letters of support in support of the housing. And that really helped kind of convince the select board. And, we can volunteer for town committees, and we cannot do this without building coalition, because we all have to remember housing is human right. Thank you.
So I see Catherine's got her hand up.
I just wanted to add 2 points. Thanks, Ganesh, for an awesome presentation. The first one is that these pilot, so our current zoning bylaws allow developers to opt out of providing affordable housing in a development if they pay what's called a payment in lieu of, not really taxes, but a payment in lieu of. So the challenge with that, and why I'd like to see that bylaw changed, is one is it says that we don't want people who can afford housing in our very nice development. So it doesn't provide for integrated housing. The second reason is the Natick Affordable Housing Trust doesn't get that money until a certificate of occupancy is issued. So for example, the Windy Low properties, those were permitted maybe 4 years ago, Ganesh?
Yeah.
At least 4 years ago. And so the Natick Affordable Housing Trust has been waiting for their payment, but the payment isn't done. So if Trask wants to go and build a single family home, which it did a street over from me, and another single family home, because the market for 10,000 square feet homes, luxury homes, is dampened by the mortgage rates. If it wants to do that, it could just in perpetuity, in 10 years, 12 years, finally build a house on that property for which the housing trust will finally get its payment. So I feel very strongly that the next step in terms of town bylaws is to get rid of that for or change it such that the value is calculated at the time the building permit is issued, and that money is given upfront to the housing trust. Because the housing trust, as I can't remember, I think it was Pat or Tom mentioned, so the housing trust gets $80,000 a year from the town. That may go away next year because the town budget, the administration may say, well, you have access now to CPC funds.
Mhm.
So let's say, for example, though it doesn't, and we get $80,000. We really can't do anything with that. And so without CPC and without the CPC funding from there, or without the payment in lieu of, there's really no way for the town to build affordable housing. And then the second thing I would mention to all of you, and to those who may be interested, you can contact me off channel, off whatever, is that you can decide if you have heirs who are not interested in taking your home, you can decide to put your home in a trust to be entered into the town's affordable housing stock. So for example, that's something my husband and I did. We have a little tiny 1,200 square foot cape in a neighborhood right across from Kennedy, walkable to the Natick train station, walkable to the mall, walkable to Route 9, walkable to the Temple Israel, and walkable to St. Pat's. So I worked with the outside group that handles, kind of oversees our calculation of the subsidized housing. What is it? Subsidized SHI.
Is it RHSO?
Yes, I
Regional-
worked with the RHSO on the SHI and asking them, what are the things we need to think about? And we don't have children, but the best gift we could leave, we think, is our home to affordable housing. So that will be entered after we die. The trustee of our trust will enter that home into the town's, it'll be deeded to the town's subsidized affordable housing. Now, what that means is the town doesn't administer it. It will be sold by an outside group that we work with, the RHSO, or its heir, whoever is in existence taking care of that. It'll be sold to somebody who qualifies under income levels then set, by the 80% AMI of Boston, and they'll be able to own it. And they won't be able to sell it for a profit, but as the property increases in value over time, they'll be able to have some sort of equity. So when they do sell it, it has to be to somebody who meets those income requirements as set by the state for the Boston metropolitan area. But I just wanted to kind of plant that, and it's something I'd like more people to think about. There are people who don't need to leave real estate to their heirs, and this would be a way to kind of contribute, kind of put our money's where our mouth is about what we want to do. Now, not everybody can do that, and I fully understand that. But for those of you who can, it's something to think about. And I'll put my email address in the chat. Thanks, Ganesh.
Thanks, Catherine. Appreciate it.
Thanks for those comments, Catherine. In particular, the thing about the house, and perhaps echoing back to a bit of a tangent off what Cindy asked about people just choosing to charge lower rates. I mean, the other thing that we see in town is smaller, older homes. When they go up for sale, they're immediately torn down, and then a much larger, non-affordable house is built. Are there any avenues at all to somehow, compensate the original homeowner for, a reasonable profit on their property, but somehow maintain that parcel of land as affordable? I don't know whether any of the agencies mentioned have any avenues to accomplish that at all, but it just seems a shame that to see all those properties needlessly go to waste just for the sake of developer profit.
I see a hand in the room.
Yeah, at MetroWorks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's me. I had a question about the accessory dwelling units. My take is that a lot of the definitions come from the state. And a lot of the requirements, but Natick has a Article 20 on the warrant. And I know that article is going to have a continuation of its hearing by the planning board on Wednesday, and I think it comes to the FinCom on Thursday, but I'm not sure. So does the Natick Article 20 have any new information that the state requirements don't have? Any new customizations that's of interest?
I think so the question is about whether the Article 20 has additional information that the state law doesn't. I think it does. It is a little bit more specific. It cannot override any of the state law, but it can provide a little bit more detail into how you go about making that happen. So in terms of like you can build up to 900 square feet or 50% of the total gross area of the primary unit as an ADU, which which is totally fine if the building is, you know, like 2,000 square feet. But you know, you also don't want to like penalize like smaller homes that are on large lots. Let's say, you know, Natick does have like a significant portion of housing stock that are like, you know, 1,200, 1,500 square foot, especially those close to the train station. And you don't want those ADUs to be smaller because the primary unit, you know, even though they are close to like train station. But you can get a special permit, and we are hoping the planning board would consider all that if when it goes to that. So just on the topic of ADUs, you know, ADUs are not for everyone. You know, when it works amazingly well because they are kind of expensive to build. The financing is kind of limited for ADUs. So if someone has like an extra $150,000, $200,000 sitting in the bank and they want to get a loan, I mean, they cost about $300,000 to $400,000 to build, even the smallest of ADUs. But then, of course, you're not paying for the land, and then you are paying for the convenience. I mean, if it's an intergenerational family, like once your children cannot afford to buy a home in Natick, but they are okay with living in a smaller unit, it works amazingly well, and that's the reason. Like when Newton legalized ADUs, this was about like 12 years ago. They don't have like a whole ton of ADUs. They have about 67 to 70 ADUs. That's like 10 ADUs a year. So I don't think we are going to be flooded with that. But when it works really well. It just helps with providing those choices. Judith.
Hey, thank you. I just wanted to circle back and kind of tie in what Catherine was talking about and what Doug was bringing up. I've done some reading recently about this whole buy suburban lots, tear down modest homes, build, you know, mini mansions. And the reading that I've done says that the land costs so much right now in communities like ours that for a builder to turn a profit, he's got to build something that brings in a lot of money. He or she, when they develop the land, and that zoning laws in communities like ours that would make it, you know, prohibitive to get allowed to put it in a couple of like modest units on a parcel of land, right? Which would be great for our housing stock, potentially great for adding some more affordable, maybe not affordable units. Make it such that the builder says, there's no way that I'm gonna go through all of that. I'm just gonna build this big giant house and I can get return on my investment for the land. I wanted to ask Ganesh if he has any understanding of community land trusts, where a municipality or a nonprofit corporation purchases land and leases the land, allowing either rental units or housing for purchase, which creates an avenue to build equity and generational wealth for community members who have been marginalized by the process for years. It ties in to what Catherine was saying, because if you do it and you sell the units or sell homes on this leased land, they can be sold, but there's a commitment to affordability and perpetuity. So they build equity, but it won't be the kind of equity that those of us who are in the market rate housing can turn, right? It also ties into Native American principles and principles throughout the world that the earth is not something that we own, it's something that we borrow. And it came out of the civil rights movement, there's housing trusts all across the country and in the UK and Australia. I didn't know if Ganesh knew more about that, and I'm looking for people who know more.
You know, it works well when there's land for development, and we don't really have that much land. I mean, there really isn't too many housing ready parcels in Natick. I mean, either they are conservation lands, which we can build. They happen to work more in the exurbs where you have like, you know, more rural communities. But what would help in a community where, like, I don't know, 60% of our properties are single family properties, is having zoning that allows for building 2-family homes in single family property. Like Minneapolis, They may, they just, there are no single family properties in like Minneapolis right now. Like you can build 2, 3 family, you can build up to 3 homes in that. So in some ways, I don't think like developers get like unfairly like vilified. They are going to go where the market is. I mean, like if they, the only way to make, if you are buying a a single story home for $650,000, that is about 15. That's a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, the Weathersfield kind of thing for 650. Obviously they are going to like build a 4,000 square foot home if they want to like make some money on top of that, right? I mean, you have to build, and the profit margins are not like that big in these like large constructions, even though you end up with these large ugly buildings. However, if you can build like 2 1,500 square foot homes in the same property, I'm sure we'll find the market, we'll find like developers would be interested, but our current zoning laws doesn't allow for it. That's exactly the missing middle I was talking about. And it doesn't have to be across the board. Maybe like one could try a pilot that is like a mile away from train stations, if we can convert, if we can. And not every single family owner want to do it, or like they could still do it and they can have their family member. Right now, we are kind of testing the waters with an ADU, which is up to 900 square feet, which is kind of like another home, right? It's like a 2-family, but it's much smaller. But it is possible to build on this and see how this goes and kind of make way for this.
Is there any, I know this would require a big zoning change here in Natick, but I'm just thinking of the neighborhood. I grew up in Newton, and it was basically decent size, single family homes. But there was a building a block away from us. It was a big old Victorian house, and it had been subdivided into, I don't know, 5 or 6 apartments. And so in that sense, I don't think it was necessarily built as a multi-unit building, but that's how it functioned. And it was fine. And the neighbors were not, it was no issue of, oh my goodness, this is going to ruin our neighborhood or anything. And, I've always thought that was kind of an interesting thing. It was probably grandfathered before there was zoning. But this idea of having a giant building, but maybe not having it be a single family unit, I'm guessing that would be kind of a non-starter public perception wise, but from my experience, as I say, it was fine. Nobody complained. Nobody thought it was odd. Nobody thought it was ruining the neighborhood. And, I don't know, just an observation, I guess, more than anything else, but.
It's interesting because that goes, I think, to the myth slides that Ganesh showed, that in the general principle that once something is there, apparently the neighbors thought this is fine. I know people that live there. Everything's great.
Yeah,
But if
gave
you
it a second
imagine
thought.
it as something that doesn't exist, then the myths all take front and center.
Mm.
And I mean, it's unfortunately human nature, but it's something that I guess we all have to fight against. There's another hand up at MetroWorks.
So 2 hands up here. I guess I'll take the prerogative since the mine was up for us, and then Bill has a question as well. Yeah, so I guess, Ganesh, I'm not quite as pessimistic as you are about the MBTA Communities Act. The article before town meeting right now is pretty useless as far as new housing. It basically kind of shifts around some zoning in downtown Natick which is already fully developed. So there's very little hope of any new housing. However, there's people on the planning board were very concerned, if not upset, that we had to stop there to meet the MBTA deadline, or the state deadline. It's end of the year. Because what people in the planning board really wanted to do, and I think what the town really wants to do, is expand the housing in West Natick. And there just wasn't time to get that together before town meeting for the fall. So there were a couple of public forums, I think some people may have been there, which had consultant reports as well, that were talking about either that medium ground, the medium density, or even high density development along the Route 135 corridor near the train station. And that has promise in many respects, in my mind, if it's done right. Certainly it bring in more housing, possibly more affordable housing. I also proposed the hoop type zoning, housing overlay option plan, which is a zoning Natick house that helps promote pocket parks, because people who are gonna be in that type of higher density housing will want some open space access, and pocket parks are probably the best they're gonna do. They're not gonna have huge areas of conservation land up there. But the hoop zoning also has 20% built in for affordable housing. If we use that model, or we could have other models of zoning that had more than 20% affordable housing. So I kind of see some hope as we move forward with West Natick. I was just wondering if I'm all wrong here, or whether there is some hope.
No, I definitely think there's hope. I do think it's kind of ideal location for like multifamily density. But in the ideal world, I don't think we need, a single type of housing can like serve all our needs. So the way our policies are, it kind of focuses like, it kind of shapes the buildings, policies matter. So it shapes all these like 40 to 50 story apartment buildings on top of like parking podium, because you kind of after, there's single family homes, there's townhomes. And to make the economics work for the developer, they kind of have to get highly subsidized land, and they need to like build like a 35 to like 40 unit. That's the reason you don't see like an 8-unit development or a 6-unit development. So I think there is a place for these large developments, and I think MBTA zoning, especially in West Natick, is going to fill that gap. But you are not going to answer the affordability housing crisis by building these 5-story buildings everywhere, because it's unpalatable. The neighbors are not going to accept it. So I think we just have to widen and expand our palette. We need to like focus more on being creative and nimble, and like, can we combine 2 single family lots and build 6 units? Can we do that and build like a small cottage cluster with like, it's like a senior living arrangement, all single story, about 1,200 square foot unit, 8 of them with this beautiful courtyard in between? Of course we can, but we cannot do that with our lots today. So I think we kind of have to start thinking creatively, because it's not just building few more apartment buildings, but it's also about reconstituting how we are thinking of homes as like, the American dream of this house in a lot. I think that needs to be like rethought of more imaginatively. And there are a lot of precedents. We won't be the first. I mean, states like Washington, Oregon, California are already doing it.
Yeah, thank you. I think as far as what I heard at that last public meeting, they were pretty open to all different ideas, and not just looking at big high rises. They were looking at all different models. So I'm hoping that, we can get a variety of models that really move us forward out there.
Is there another question from MetroWorks?
Yeah, Bill.
Yes, hi. This is a new area. I don't know what the rules are on this, but if someone qualifies for affordable housing, and they're in a affordable housing unit or home or whatever, and their circumstances change materially, they get a huge job, they marry someone that is making $400,000 a year. Do they get reevaluated periodally, or do they?
That's a really great question. I don't know. I have not. Yeah, and also the other, just to build on your question, it only talks about income. I mean, it doesn't really talk about wealth. I mean, like someone could own like a whole bunch of houses and like, show. So I'm not really sure how this vetting thing works. All I know is the waiting list is kind of enormous to get into this, any of these Section 8 housing.
It's my understanding from the research that I've done that folks in affordable housing submit documentation on an annual basis.
Okay.
And like often their growth might change the amount that they're paying, right? Their 30% of their income might go up. I don't know what happens when if you hit that benchmark that now you're actually at AMI, in terms of getting out of the affordable housing, or because we want that unit to remain affordable, right? So we couldn't just say, oh, now you pay market rate, unless we figure out another vacant unit that we can flip to affordable. But
Brinley?
To Cindy and Brinley and Sarah, I think.
Okay.
Actually, Brinley had her hand up first, but
Thanks. Mine is a little off topic. I'm grateful for all of this, but since I live near Cedar Gardens, I'm always curious, who can we have on to talk with us about Cedar Gardens and about fixing Cedar Gardens and the money for Cedar Gardens and how to make Cedar Gardens better? And you had talked earlier about not being able to use certain monies for maintenance. How do we, and who do we talk to in the town about advocating at the state level to make Cedar Gardens better? Because truthfully, it's an embarrassment. It's an extreme embarrassment. And every day walking by it and the people that I know that live there, it's really such a travesty.
So the Cedar Gardens is administered by its own board. That's the Natick Housing Authority. So the Natick Housing Authority has they administer it. They are responsible for maintaining it, and they are dependent on state and federal funds. And what you are, it's unfortunate, but it's kind of endemic to most public housing because costs have been increasing everywhere, and we have not been, there has not been enough. I mean, I can't speak for the housing authority, but I could speak for someone working for the state, working for an agency responsible for buildings. Capital budget is the one that gets cut first when it comes because you need, if even for state-owned hospitals and everything, these buildings are built 60, 80 years ago, and quite honestly, a lot of them have to be replaced because you can only do so much in terms of repair, and we just don't have the money for it.
thanks. It's a good takeaway though, Brinley. Martin and I can see if there's somebody that we can come speak to us about Natick's particular situation. I think Cindy had her hand up, and then also Sarah.
My comment has gone by. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Cindy?
So I live right here in the center and I do a lot of walking around and I wonder if you know, or if anybody knows anything about the Verizon building. And I'd also like to have a better understanding of the old school on, is it Cottage Street? And then to the left of it, or north of it, there's this great big old mansion. I understand I don't know who lives there. And then on the other side, I think it's School Street Extension. There's a row of, I don't know what houses those are, but they're all one-story houses, and I don't know if they're publicly owned. They could be raised up.
I don't, I don't know for sure, but I don't think they are publicly owned.
Okay. And what about?
Do we know anything about those other school buildings that Cindy was talking about?
I don't.
Does anybody here know about I'm pretty sure it's affordable housing in the school.
You mean Coolidge Garden?
You're talking about Coolidge?
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
Right over here.
Oh, you were talking.
Yeah, it's the housing authorities building.
Yeah, that's the housing authority.
Their housing.
Okay, and then what about the big mansion just north of it?
That is congregate housing for people with disabilities, also under Natick Affordable Housing.
Okay.
And again, the Natick Housing Authority would be the one.
That's what I mean, housing authority.
Okay. And anybody know anything about the Verizon building?
I think it just got rezoned in the tweaking of
Okay.
downtown.
Yeah.
So that it could be multi-unit, multi-purpose. I think it fell into that
Okay.
because there was an abutter but I don't know who owns it or what is happening with it. But
And is the land next to it that's open space, is that a park or is that a buildable lot?
next to that home around the
It's
corner,
between the brand new construction, opposite where the St. Patrick's School was.
I think
that
that land
corner
belongs
is
to that home.
Okay. Oh, okay.
That big yard
Yeah,
next, I think
yeah.
it belongs to that
On the
white
High Street.
home.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Sally, did you have something to add or ask? There you go.
Yes, I do. Ganesh, I'm very, excuse me, very curious about the large housing in Natick Village and Natick Greens in West Natick. Is that all privately owned? In other words, that's a world of housing that is elusive to me.
That's my understanding. It's all privately owned. I'm not sure if they have some Section 8, I mean, like they could have some folks with Section 8 vouchers, but they're not like deeded housing. I mean, they're still market rate. The Section 8 would provide the market rate to the developer. So it's all private. So it doesn't mean there may be those who needs affordable housing are getting that there, but I'm guessing the percentages is going to be significantly small.
Do they interface at all with the Natick Housing Authority?
No, we don't interface with anyone who's getting vouchers. I mean, like at the core, we are an advocacy organization. We can advocate for policies and we like help garner support when we think these projects can bring in more housing. We are not, and we, sometimes we work with Natick Service Council to provide rental assistance, but we never interact with the clients directly. We are working with the organization, whether it's Family Promise or Service Council. And we don't have the capacity for that too, because it's a volunteer run.
Cool. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands up at the moment. I want to thank you so much, Ganesh, for coming to speak to us. Clearly, from the nature of the questions and the discussions, this is a thorny problem with no single solution, no easy solutions. But we're certainly thankful for everything that you're doing, that the trust is doing, that the CPC is going to be doing to generate some funds for this area. Man, it's a big problem. I think we all want to see it better than it easily can become. I'm glad in a way that we've finished up a few minutes early because Martin and I were talking about this. We wanted to take just a couple of minutes to preview and have a bit of an ask for one of our upcoming sessions. As I mentioned at the outset, with Article 20 on accessory dwelling units, today's session kind of starts to tweak us into fall meeting preparation. Next Monday, we'll have Frank Foss here for his typical wonderful walkthrough of the full warrant. And then the following Monday, there are three, we'll have our internal discussion for folks to kind of lobby, argue for or against particular warrant articles, including the three citizen petitions. The sponsors of those petitions are specifically going to be taking some of our time that day to educate us on those. Then we turn our attention to the national election, the November election. And honestly, I mean, early voting's already started. It's already getting late in the game. I don't know that anybody's mind is open at this point about candidates, but there are 5 ballot questions. State ballot questions. And we'd really like to have some discussion. Martin, what are we looking at? Which date in October for that?
First session is October 21st, so that would be a good time to discuss some early voting in Massachusetts. Actually starts on October 19th because there's a full 2 weeks of early voting. So if we have a discussion on the 21st, the people can hold off sending in their ballots for 2 days. So get maybe some more information about these questions, which are often very ambiguous.
Yeah, and so the ask is, I mean, I think probably everybody should have received their red book that somewhat describes these, but often in confusing terms. Just real quickly, the 5 questions: the state auditor's authority to audit the legislator, the elimination of MCAS, unionization for transportation network drivers, limited legalization and regulation of certain natural psychedelic substances, and minimum wage for tip workers. The ask here is, I'm wondering if any of our wonderful Coffee with a Purpose members would be willing to take on the assignment of presenting on October 21st about one or more of those, to just kind of wade through you know, all of the confusing language and give us a clear common sense understanding of what the heck the question represents.
Doug, I'm happy to take MCAS.
Great.
And I've actually started wading into the tips, so I think I'm happy to take that one too.
Thank you.
I'll be happy.
Hey, Brinley.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm
Sarah?
happy to wade into the one on the psychedelics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is fantastic. Okay.
I lost there.
I'd also like to be really sure before we move on too much to say thank you to Ganesh so much. I'm
Yes.
always so grateful
Absolutely.
that you come and speak to us, and it really is wonderful the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
And I, as I think I mentioned, being on the CPC, this is really helpful because it's certainly something that I, you know, hope that we can accomplish with the community preservation funds, is to help do something about our affordable housing crisis. So thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
It's
I
helpful.
spoke to Martin, and we can even have the developers of 5 Auburn Street to come and present, and talk about the challenges, or they can talk about the project. They can also talk about what it means to be an affordable housing developer.
Mhm.
And so one can get an appreciation for what they do. So maybe like after the town meeting like settles,
That would
I'm
be-
happy to come back with them for a more conversation or a discussion as to like how to make it happen. So
that would
thank
be
you all.
super helpful.
I would love that personally.
Yeah, it's very easy for us to just talk developer without really understanding their world in detail. So
Yeah, I mean, from the work I did, as I say, reviewing environmental issues of, lead paint and contaminated ground and what have you, that gave me a little window into how complicated it is.
great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you. I know, Ganesh, I know you also have a hard stop at 10:30,
Yeah.
so feel free to drop off earlier if you feel you need to. But again, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good seeing you
Yeah.
all. Bye.
Any last takers, or maybe folks can think about in the days ahead, state auditors authority to